When the woman from the HOA marched onto my property and told me to demolish the structure on my land, I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply looked at her, then looked at the tower rising quietly above the tree line, and let the silence do the talking, because I knew something she did not. And in my experience, the most satisfying moments in life begin with letting the wrong person stay confidently wrong just a little while longer. I purchased this land over 2 decades ago, long before any developer had drawn a single line on a blueprint for this valley. Back then, the entire area was open countryside, rolling hills, old oak trees, gravel roads, and the kind of stillness that city people drive hours to find. There was no subdivision, no matching mailboxes, no newsletter reminding you which shade of paint your fence was allowed to be. Just land. Honest, quiet land. I had spent 20 years in the Air Force, working with communication infrastructure, relay systems, signal towers, satellite arrays. When I retired, I was not looking for excitement. I was looking for exactly the opposite. This land gave me that peace. But before I ever broke ground on my own home, I noticed a problem that the entire valley shared. Cell coverage was practically non-existent. You could stand on your roof, point your phone toward the sky, and still get nothing. Businesses struggled. Emergencies were frightening. Families felt cut off. I reached out to a telecommunications company I had dealt with through my military work. They had been searching for a suitable tower location in the valley for years, but had run into community resistance everywhere they tried. My ridge was ideal, elevated, naturally shielded, away from residential lines. We negotiated a 99-year lease. They constructed a relay tower built to resemble a traditional agricultural silo, something that fit naturally into the rural landscape. From a distance, most people assumed it had been standing there for generations. Within weeks of going live, the valley had reliable signal. Emergency calls connected. Businesses ran smoothly. And every year, the lease provided me a steady income, while a fiber line ran directly to my home as part of our agreement. For 15 years, that tower stood silently doing its job. Nobody noticed it. Nobody cared. Then the developers moved in. They bought up the surrounding farmland, divided it into identical plots, and filled them with houses that looked like copies of copies. And where new suburban neighborhoods appear, HOA boards are never far behind. Within 2 years, a homeowners association had formed, complete with bylaws, violation notices, and a woman I will call Patricia, though she carried herself like she preferred the title of supreme authority. Patricia had joined the board through sheer persistence, the kind of person who attends every meeting, speaks the longest, and gradually outlasts everyone else until she is simply in charge by exhaustion. Once she became president, the neighborhood transformed into her personal project. Trash bins visible from the street, fine. Porch light, the wrong wattage, fine. Flowers, not from the pre-approved species list, fine. She ran the HOA not as a service to the community, but as a mechanism of control. I had largely stayed beneath her radar. My land predated the entire subdivision, and there was little legal ground for her to stand on when it came to me. But power, when it runs out of easy targets, always goes searching. And one afternoon, she drove past my ridge and noticed the tower. To someone who understood infrastructure, telecommunications law, and federal regulations, that structure was untouchable. To Patricia, it was simply something she had not approved, and that alone was reason enough to act. She delivered a notice to my door. Formal language, bold print, a fine of $10,000, with $500 added for every day the structure remained. She had clearly enjoyed writing it. I read it once, placed it on my workbench, and went back to what I was doing, because I had learned something in 20 years of service. When someone fires the first shot emotionally, the worst response is to fire back immediately. You wait, you watch, you prepare. Patricia read my silence as weakness. More letters arrived. The fines climbed. Then she posted a public notice at the subdivision entrance, listing my address as a community violation, a transparent attempt to turn neighbors against me before I had even responded. That was the moment I decided to take a walk through the neighborhood, not to argue my case, just to listen. What I found was remarkable. Nearly every family had a story. An elderly couple fined because their birdbath was not an approved color. A family whose children's swing set had been deemed too vibrant. A retired serviceman locked in a weeks-long battle over a flagpole that stood 2 inches above the permitted height. Each family believed they were alone in their struggle. That is precisely how Patricia maintained her grip, by keeping everyone isolated, everyone feeling like the only one, everyone too embarrassed or exhausted to compare notes. So we changed that. Within days, a small group gathered at my home. No drama, no speeches, just coffee, a whiteboard, and people who were tired of being quietly managed. And then someone asked the question that cracked everything open. Where does the money go? HOA fines do not vanish, they move somewhere. So we formally requested the association's complete financial records. What arrived looked wrong from the first page. Sections blacked out, pages missing, account references with no supporting documentation. To most people, it might have resembled disorganized bookkeeping. To anyone trained to read systems and spot irregularities, it looked like something being hidden. Within an afternoon of digging, we found it. The HOA's primary landscaping vendor had been registered 18 months earlier. The owner was Patricia's brother-in-law. The association had been paying well above market rate for ordinary work, while the difference flowed quietly into the family. This was no longer a dispute about a tower. This was fraud. I contacted an attorney I trusted, a woman named Sandra, who had spent years handling exactly this kind of case. She reviewed everything and was direct. This is not a neighborhood disagreement, she said. This is the foundation of a criminal investigation. Her advice was straightforward. Let Patricia escalate. Let her call the meeting she clearly wanted to call, and then let the room see everything. 2 weeks later, she did exactly that. A special emergency session at the community center. Patricia opened with a prepared speech about shared values, community standards, and the responsibilities of leadership. Then she gestured toward me and announced that the board would be voting to pursue legal action and force removal of the structure on my land. I asked for a few minutes to speak. She agreed, probably expecting an apology. I connected my laptop to the projector. The first slide showed a coverage map of the valley from the year I signed my lease, a solid red zone labeled "No Signal." The second slide showed the tower. This structure, I said, is the reason every phone in this room works, the reason you can call an ambulance, the reason your children can call you when they need help. The room became very still. Then I showed the telecommunications company's letter outlining the federal protections on the tower. Then the financial records. Then the company registration connecting the landscaping payments to Patricia's family. The murmur began spreading across the room. But I had one final demonstration. I called the Network Operations Center, gave my authorization credentials, and requested a temporary diagnostic shutdown of the relay unit on my ridge. Within 5 seconds, signal dropped across the entire room. Phones went dark. People looked at their screens. Someone near the back said their medical monitoring application had disconnected. In under a minute, every person in that room understood, physically and personally, what Patricia had been trying to destroy. I looked at her directly. The room did not stay quiet after that. A motion of no confidence was raised, seconded immediately, and passed by an overwhelming margin. Patricia's board dissolved the same evening. A forensic audit was opened within the week. What it uncovered was systematic inflated invoices, personal expenses charged to community accounts, fines redirected into accounts with no association records. Criminal charges followed. Patricia eventually sold her home to cover legal costs and restitution. The neighborhood that emerged afterward was unrecognizable in the best possible way. Families painted what they wanted. Children had colorful swing sets again. The elderly couple near the entrance installed the most extravagant birdbath you have ever seen, and told me they had been waiting 2 years to do it. And the tower still stands on my ridge, carrying signals across the valley, doing the same job it has done for 20 years. I think about that entire episode sometimes, and always arrive at the same conclusion. Authority without accountability is dangerous, but arrogance, built on ignorance, has a natural expiration date. Patricia came to my land, certain she had the power to erase something she did not understand. She was right that one of us would be torn down before it was over. She was wrong about which one. If someone in your community is using rules as weapons, using isolation to keep people quiet, and using authority to serve themselves rather than the people they are supposed to represent, I genuinely want to ask you this. Would you speak up? Would you start the conversation? Or would you stay quiet and hope the finger never swings in your direction? Because in my experience, it always does. The only real question is whether you are ready when it arrives.